Greetings and welcome to the construction videos for the DeadSpatula Construction. That sounds wrong. DeadSpatula Creations Rocky Horror Laser. Now, in constructing this, you're gonna have to do it over about 3 days if you're using the E6000. As I mentioned, E6000 has about a 24-hour cure time, and you don't want to try to be putting it together while pieces, and you're gonna start fighting over dry times. Not good. This is gonna be addressed in 3 steps: gluing the halves together, gluing the curves onto the base, and then gluing the tines onto the whole piece. It's actually very simple. I've tried to idiot-proof it in as many places as I can. So let's get started. First off, you'll want both your base pieces and 5 pins. So, in editing these videos, I realized I provided some advice, which is contrary to what I would actually like to provide. In the following steps, I tell you to check to make sure the pins fit in the holes. I tell you that I've tried to make it so that all the holes will fit the pins when I produce it. But I tell you to double check just to make sure that everything fits. Now, this is good advice, but I'm addressing it on a part-by-part basis. I would actually recommend that prior to gluing any pieces together, you get the full set of 18 pins into all pieces. Remember, you only need to do 1/2 of a piece with pins in it. Don't put pins in both halves. You're not going to be able to put them together. But definitely get, a half of all 6 pieces onto with pins in them before you proceed. Some pinholes are a little tight. Some pinholes are a little broad, and so you want to be able to play around with pieces until you can get a set of pins that fit in all spaces. So please keep that in mind as you put it together. The body. So when you need to construct it, it's actually a very simple process. Obviously, you've got 2 halves. Each with 5 holes, the pinholes. So the first thing you want to do is you want to take one of your pins and insert it into each hole. You want to make sure, this is especially important if you print it yourself, that your pins go in all of that a pin fits in every hole, both sides. Why this is necessary is that there is a little tight one there. Okay, so there is this idea, not an idea, but a result of 3D printing called elephant footing. That is to say, when you're heating something, and this is printed like this, flat, as it lays down the layers, the top layers start to get a little heavy, and they press down on the bottom layers as well. If your printer isn't calibrated, sometimes it'll press down when laying down the plastic. So what do you do about this? Well, in general, you just kind of sand it off. But it comes into special note when you're looking at the pinholes. You see, because sometimes the surface of that pinhole right here is actually a little, what's the word? It is actually has some of that elephant footing in it. So while the hole is perfectly sized perfectly capable of holding the pin, the entryway can't. So what you do is you take your X-Acto. Now this is why I said you need an X-Acto if you're printing for yourself. If you're not printing for yourself, I should have done this job for you. It's still recommended an X-Acto because the pin should be almost the same, but I might have gotten a statistically slightly smaller pin, and the pin you might be looking with is a slightly larger pin, and it doesn't quite work out. But you shouldn't have a problem if you're getting it from me. It's a large, I can't say 1 in a million, but it's a rare occurrence. But if you're printing this yourself, or you found I had this problem and sent to you, take your X-Acto knife, you bring it in, and you kind of just gouge the corner out. You're just cutting with the tip of your X-Acto knife and cutting the corner of that entry. If you go a little big on that cut, don't worry about it. As well, don't worry if the pin is slightly loose when you do get it in there. These pins are not precision manufactured. They are not intended to produce a tight fit. They can, depending on the size of the pin and how the entrance goes, but they do not require a tight fit to function properly. So once you've got that done, you go through your other all you do is you just put it in all your other holes. And this is weird. I thought I had this piece perfect. Clearly I'm wrong. Now you need to not be at an angle to get these in. That's sometimes a problem. So now, once you've checked each side, you've checked this one, you've checked the other one, you want to put 5 pins in one side of the piece. Now, again, be careful when pulling pins out. You do not want to drop and lose a pin. I know I've given you 4 spares, but I've only given you 4 spares. You need, or 6 spares. You need 18 of them. So, you can't afford to lose too many. I know you can't see anything right now. I apologize about that, but alright, so now you've got 5 pins. Now you need to take your glue. As I've mentioned before, I recommend E6000. It's a strong, flexible glue that will resist impact. All you need to do is apply the glue liberally to all surfaces. I recommend you actually put in more than you need. It's going to get squished out when you put these together. That's okay. In fact, that's good because it'll fill in a lot of imperfections. The print surface is good, but occasionally the edges don't quite line up right. Having the glue come out like that after it dries, you can get a really good surface by sanding or filing that away, or even cutting it or pulling it. You'll fill in any potential gaps there, and so it actually balances out. So after you put the glue on it, and I know I haven't done it, unfortunately I had to redo the videos where I actually glued this together. This piece I have right now can't be glued together. It needs to go to a client unassembled. So you put it on top of each other, get the pins aligned, and you have a little bit of flex in it, but not much. Now, it's important that you're going to start getting goo coming out of the sides. So be careful. You don't want to get it all over your hands. But then comes the important part. Clamping. As I said, you can get some cheap clamps on Amazon or Harbor Freight. You get the right ones, and they can be pretty tough. But even cheapo ones like these can work. If you've only got small clamps like these, make sure you clamp all the angles. So you get this bar. You get this bar here, and this bar here, and this bar here, and probably right out here. You want one right here to make sure the whole thing stays together. If you've got bigger clamps, that can support it, I highly recommend clamping your spheres. This clamp is actually almost not big enough. I thankfully have some bigger clamps. Oh, they actually don't have... there we go. Well, I'm going to use this one because it's a little less unwieldy. Now, that's important because, as you'll see, the spheres have a tendency to want to separate. That's partially because of how they get put together, or they get printed. Taking them off the bed sometimes warps this a little bit. But you can put pressure on that, and it works. Putting pressure back here right at the base can work if you've only got small clamps. But as you can see, a slight seam is appearing, and you might not have a perfect fit in that case. So let me show you what a fully clamped one looks like. The body needs a lot of clamps. There's a lot of surface area. You want to get as much of it clamped as possible. Very, very critical. You need to clamp. There we go. You need to clamp this lightning bolt. One of the reasons this is such I warp it pulling it off is that I've had to make a lot of work to keep these adhered to the bed and from warping, and unfortunately pulling them off, the process of pulling them off does institute a small amount of warping. It's generally not noticeable, but if you don't clamp this lightning bolt, it will pull apart and it will be noticeable. So make sure, whatever you do, you gotta get pressure on either side of this lightning bolt to hold it together. Alright, so curves. Again, it's the same process. Your twos is apparently what I'm starting out with. You take your pin and you put it into the holes. Make sure they fit. Because again, sometimes you get a bit of that elephant footing in the holes, and you can't actually put these pins in. A pliers is sometimes useful in this step. If you can't get a pin out, I mean, just leave it there. There's no reason to force it out. But if you really don't want to keep forcing pins in and losing them, and having to pull out another one, or you're like me and just weird about how you approach this, pliers can be used to pull the ones that are a little bit of a tight fit. It turns out with this one, I'm not having to cut out any of my holes. They all seem to have come together pretty nicely. So again, you put the pins in, take your E6000, glue, just go wild. Notable thing, when these are together, there are surfaces on both pieces that are exposed. It's only just this curve here, and a little bit on the base side that needs to be glued. I recommend gluing the tine side and getting heavy use in here and just past the pin on the tine side, and that should give you good coverage. As I said before, when using the E6000, I do like to have overflow. Overflow will allow us can be sanded off with the metal file, cut off with the X-Acto. Many other approaches, you can just pick it off with your fingers if you got fingernails. And it produces a better, more contiguous surface when you do it that way. So, you put it together, squeeze. If you're using that technique, wipe some of that excess glue off there. Try not to go too deep, or you're going to start brewing, or you're going to start getting into it and losing that critical overflow that provides us with that contiguous surface. And then you clamp. Of course, if you're using a fast-acting glue, the clamping step is not necessary. I prefer to use 2 clamps, one at either end of the overlapping surface. Now for the tines. Well, let me first say, it's the exact same process with your ones. So, to the tines. Alright, so your tines. Your tines each have 3 holes. History has shown that the 3 holes are, you need holes in all 3 to get a proper alignment. I guess perhaps I could have removed the middle hole. Originally, the design only had the 2, but this end was a little too wild and didn't align 100%. So we added a 3rd one near the end. Now, these tines are experiencing a bit of elephant footing. So allow me to remind you, this is where the X-Acto knife comes in handy. And again, I'm going to try to test this before I send them out to you, but I can't always do that. I'm not always going to be perfect. Having an X-Acto knife is a good thing. So you just kind of get in there and cut that corner. The goal is to kind of cut away the corners of the opening, that is, the edges of the opening. Widening that hole because the interior is normally good. It's normally just that entrance that is a problem. So allow me to finish this, and then I'll once again demonstrate putting how to glue these together. Alright, so now I've got the tines. This is the long piece. Now, I recommend you glue the short piece because then you're not going to get any glue on the exposed surface as the attachment point. And again, just put it out there. Don't go way overboard, but you know, if you go a little overboard, that's really okay because again, we're expecting to get that surface, that overflow to fill in any minor gaps in the print. If you have this laying down like this, you can just easily lay this down, snaps together. Congratulations, you have a piece. I use 2 to 3 clamps on this. You definitely want to clamp the ends. And I like to clamp the middle as well because you want to get some, because this is producing uneven pressure. So you want clamp right there in the middle. And there you go. You have a, yeah, it's not perfect, but who cares? The pressure is going to, over this is going to be fine to hold these together while the glue dries. Repeat this for your other 2 tines, and you will have everything. I realize it's a lot of clamps. You might even have to spread this over, more days to get, because you don't have enough clamps. Harbor Freight, I mean, they'll give you like 50 of those clamps for $10 or something. But, if you're trying to use something more substantial and you don't have the money, it's okay. It's just how fast you can put these together. I know you're eager to have your gun together, but patience is the key to having a nice, excellent looking product. So that's all for part 1. Part 2, as I've said before, that's going to be to put the the tine curves onto the base of the gun. I'm also going to cover some finishing steps you're going to want to do before you make that process. You want to have you don't want to have to wait until it's one big ungainly thing before you start thinking about making some of these seams perfect. So before you get really into part 2, I'm going to be giving some steps on how to finish the seams so that they aren't noticeable. Get rid of all that excess glue. See you then.